watching E! News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Gaza sites hit as the Israel-Iran conflict continues, with Qatar warning of retaliation. EU leaders meet in Brussels to address security, Ukraine and rising energy risks. And Pakistan agrees to pause strikes on Afghanistan ahead of Eid. Thanks for joining us. Missile strikes and counter-strikes are now directly hitting key gas facilities in Iran and Qatar, raising the stakes in an already volatile region. With Israel, Iran and Gulf states increasingly involved, the risk of a broader conflict is growing rapidly.
US President Donald Trump said late Wednesday that Israel carried out an attack on Iran's South Pars gas field. He stated that the United States and Qatar were not involved and had no prior knowledge of the strike. In a post on Truth Social, Trump also said he does not expect further Israeli attacks on that facility. He warned of escalation if Iran continues targeting Qatar. However, Iran immediately responded by launching missiles at Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial city. This area hosts the world's largest liquefied natural gas processing facility and is central to operations run by Qatar Energy. Qatar confirmed that rockets struck its main gas site early Thursday, causing fires and significant damage. Officials said 4 out of 5 Iranian ballistic missiles were intercepted, but 1 missile hit Ras Laffan, leading to extensive destruction. Qatar has called Iran a direct threat to regional stability and says it reserves the right to respond. Prior to the attacks, Qatar had evacuated key LNG facilities following Iranian warnings of possible strikes on Gulf energy infrastructure. Iran also issued evacuation warnings for energy sites in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Saudi officials say they thwarted an attempted attack on a gas facility. In Riyadh, 4 people were injured by falling debris. The UAE reported intercepting missiles that were heading toward oil and gas targets. Meanwhile, Iran launched missiles toward Tel Aviv, including ones carrying cluster warheads. Israel says its defense systems intercepted the attack. Israeli officials have accused Iran of repeatedly using cluster munitions, which release multiple smaller explosives and are harder to stop. In another development, Iran's president says Israel killed intelligence minister Ismail Khatib in an overnight strike. This was earlier announced by Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz. The United States Central Command also released video footage showing what it described as strikes on Iranian military targets.
Well, US intelligence officials are warning that Iran could eventually develop long-range missiles capable of reaching the United States. The Pentagon is now seeking over $200 billion in additional funding, signaling the conflict could last longer than expected. Our Washington correspondent Ubi Shabandar has more.
The Director for Central Intelligence told members of the Senate Intelligence Committee that if left unimpeded, Iran would have the ability to produce long-range missiles that could reach the continental United States. That was one of the main reasons why degrading and destroying Iran's missile production capabilities, which is ongoing as part of Operation Epic Fury, is such a main priority for American national security. That was according to the director of CIA. The Trump administration believes that the culmination of weeks of strikes is having a major impact on the fighting ability as well as on the command and control of Iranian forces, as a number of senior leaders continue to be killed. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified on Wednesday in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, declaring that the Iranian regime, quote, appears to be intact, but largely degraded. The Pentagon has reportedly asked the White House for more than $200 billion of additional funding for the Iran war, suggesting that the conflict might last longer than expected. Reports in Washington indicate that President Trump was supportive of Israel's recent strikes against Iran's energy infrastructure. The U.S. officials say they do not believe any further attacks are warranted against major Iranian energy sites unless Iran escalates attacks on oil ships or the energy infrastructure of neighboring Arab countries. President Trump posted on social media late on Wednesday saying that no more attacks will be made by Israel against Iran's South Pars oil and gas field, in an attempt to prevent a cycle of retaliatory attacks following Iran's missile strikes against Qatar's largest liquefied natural gas facility. Trump said that if Iran continues such attacks against Qatar's energy infrastructure, that the U.S. military would have no choice but to totally destroy the entirety of Iran's South Pars gas field, an outcome which would have devastating consequences for Iran's economy. I'm Ubi Shabander, A News, Washington.
3 Palestinian women have died and dozens more were injured in the West Bank after an Iranian missile strike, the first Palestinian casualties in the US-Israeli conflict with Iran.
3 Palestinian women were killed in an Iranian missile attack in the West Bank late on Wednesday, according to the Palestinian Red Crescent. It is the first deadly Iranian strike in the area and the first to kill Palestinians since the start of the US-Israeli war with Iran. 13 others were injured, including 1 person in critical condition. The missile struck a hair salon in the town of Beit Awa, southwest of Hebron, the Palestinian Authority's official news agency Wafa reported. Local residents report that several other buildings in the area were also damaged.
To be honest, I only heard when my grandchildren and children came to me and said, "Come and see." I asked them what happened. They said, "Your uncle's house was hit."
The Israeli military said it believes the strike was caused by a cluster munition, a warhead that breaks into smaller bomblets over a wide area. Also on Wednesday, a man described as a foreign worker was killed in Moshav Adanim in Israel's Sharon region during a missile attack. Injuries were also reported from shrapnel in nearby Arab-Israeli towns, while an 8-story building caught fire after an impact in Tel Aviv.
Iran's top diplomat has urged the EU as well as neighbouring and regional countries to pressure Israel and the United States over the fallout of their war against the Islamic Republic. Our correspondent Taraz Shiralilu reports from Tehran.
It is the 20th day of the Israel-US war against Iran, and I'm reporting from downtown capital Tehran. In the newest development, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has called on the European Union and the regional states to direct their pressure to Washington and Tel Aviv over backlashes of their war, spreading to global markets and Western assets in the region. According to official media, in a phone talk with EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, he strongly criticized the dishonest approach of certain European countries towards the aggression against Iran. He said, "If the European countries are concerned about peace and security in the region, they should seek to exert pressure on the aggressors instead of adopting irresponsible positions." Also in separate telephone contacts with foreign ministers of Turkey, Egypt and Pakistan, he said that the Wednesday attack on Iran's South Pars gas field was an act aimed at escalating regional tension. And in New York, Iranian ambassador at the UN headquarters, Amir Saeed Iravani, in letters to the UN Secretary General, the President of the Security Council, and the President of the General Assembly, slammed the attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure, also condemning the killing of senior Iranian officials. He termed the recent targeting of Iranian energy facilities as a gross and serious violation of international law, including the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law, and attributed the attack to Israel. Taraz Shiralilu from Tehran for A News.
To other news now, and leaders from across the European Union are arriving in Brussels for a summit as they look to tackle rising oil and gas prices driven by the conflict in the Middle East. The Middle East war continues to affect key energy producers and shipping routes, pushing up energy costs across Europe. Also on the agenda is Hungary's veto on a €90 billion loan for Ukraine.
We are very worried about the energy crisis. We're already worried before the start of the war. Prices were too high, and this war has, of course, created another spike in the prices. And if that becomes structural, we're in deep trouble. And I think at the European level, some measures can be taken to address the problem of the high energy prices. I will have some propositions about that, but I will, of course, put them on the table inside and not tell them to the press. But I think, to give you one example, ETS reform is high on the agenda.
The Hungarian position is very simple. We are ready to support Ukraine when we get our oil, which is blocked by them. It's existential for Hungary, you know.
To get the oil,
to get the oil is existential for the Hungarians. Without getting that oil, all the households in Hungary and companies will go to bankruptcy. So, you know, it's not a joke. It's not a political game. Zelensky should understand it, that this is not a game. This is absolutely existential for the Hungarians.
More on that summit later. Russia reported on Wednesday that its forces took control of a settlement in the Donetsk region of Ukraine in the past 24 hours, while Kyiv, on the same day, claimed to have prevented Russian advances. Russia's Ministry of Defense says its forces carried out strikes across 145 areas, targeting Ukrainian energy and transport infrastructure used by the military, as well as temporary positions of Ukrainian units. On the same day, Ukraine's General Staff said its forces are blocking Russian advances and have inflicted significant losses in Russian personnel and equipment across several fronts. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced the Navy's future nuclear-powered aircraft carrier will be named Le France Libre, meaning Free France. It's the largest military vessel ever built in France, set to replace the Charles de Gaulle in 2038. The vessel's operational capacity will surpass the Charles de Gaulle by 40%, which is currently in the eastern Mediterranean. The new aircraft carrier can transport 78,000 tons and carry 30 fighter aircraft, 6 helicopters and drones.
Our new aircraft carrier will be named Free France. More than just a warship, it is a constant demonstration of our determination and commitment to act alone if necessary, and with our allies, if possible. Our allies expect us to be ready, capable, credible, and determined, and our potential adversaries must know that France is a major power. This new aircraft carrier will cost nearly 10 billion euros. It is a huge investment.
Well, global energy markets have reacted quickly to the latest strikes in the Gulf, with oil prices surging above $110 a barrel, following reports of an airstrike on Iran's South Pars gas field. Gas prices also jumped as Qatar reported extensive damage to its Ras Laffan industrial site, home to a refinery which Iran had said was a target. Despite the sharp increases, both oil and gas prices remain below the peaks seen earlier in the conflict. Transport groups across the Philippines staged a nationwide strike today to protest against soaring fuel prices. Drivers warned their incomes are being squeezed as costs rise amid the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Demonstrators are calling for fare increases and urging the government to suspend fuel-related taxes. The Philippines relies almost entirely on Middle Eastern crude oil and has been grappling with price surges linked to the US-Israeli conflict involving Iran. Well, after the break, we'll be looking ahead to that EU summit, which is set to begin in Brussels later today. Stay with us.
Some of the problems of European Union today are connected with the rapid enlargement. How do you see this issue today in 2026?
After Brexit, no country will never get out of the European Union.
Europe is facing massive challenges. How do you see Europe in 50 years' time?
Not easy. In the future, we shall have in our reserves as many dollars as many euros. Because if side by side with the dollar there is the euro, there will be room for the renminbi.
With Mars, the global AI and sensor technology starts now.
we need to adapt much quicker and much faster to allow us to detect, to classify, and to ultimately defeat these new asymmetric threats. We can use NIDAR to autonomously instruct and guide that asset, whether it be a tracked UGV or a surveillance drone.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back to A News. EU leaders are gathering in Brussels for a high-stakes summit dominated by war, energy pressures and a looming financial crunch in Ukraine, with a crucial loan package for Kyiv still blocked by Hungary's Viktor Orban. Joining us now to look ahead to the summit is geopolitical analyst João Marques de Almeida. Thank you for being with us. Now, so much going on, the Middle East, Ukraine, energy. What's going to be the top of the agenda at the summit today?
Thank you for inviting me. I think there will be two main issues in the agenda. One is the increase in the natural gas prices and in the energy prices as a result of that. There was a huge increase this morning in the European natural gas prices as a result of the Iranian attacks on Qatari and UAE gas fields yesterday. So that will be one issue. And the second issue will be the loan to Ukraine, the famous 90 billion euros loan to Ukraine, which hopefully Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, will finally agree to approve. So those will be the kind of the two main issues that they will discuss. I think on the first issue, the European leaders will try to come up with some measures to bring down energy prices, especially for industries and for households in Europe. Measures around subsidies, temporary subsidies, and possibly even lowering the taxes down, so bringing taxes on energy down. And then on the loan in the Ukraine, hopefully they will approve the loan, which is very important for the Ukrainians. As you know, the loan, the 90 billion euros, 60 billion euros is to buy defense material for Ukraine, and 30 billion euros for fiscal needs of Ukraine. So hopefully there will be an agreement on that.
Hopefully being the operative word there for the European diplomats, I think. Now, how confident are you that we're going to see Orban back down from his veto today and unlock that 90 billion euro loan?
Well, Orban has been saying for a couple of weeks that his condition to agree is that the Ukrainians will fix the pipeline that goes through Ukraine and brings Russian oil to Hungary, which is pretty important for the Hungarian economy. Now, the European Commission decided this week to fund the work to fix that pipeline. So apparently Orbán agreed to approve the loan in today's European Council. But Orbán, as we know, is unpredictable. He faces elections early next month. So there's always this domestic electoral issue on Orbán's decisions. But the European Commission is really committed to fix the pipeline as soon as possible in order to unblock Orbán's veto on the Ukrainian loan. It is very important for Ukrainians to receive this money from the EU. It is both important for their fiscal situation, but especially for their ability to continue the war against the Russians.
Now, you mentioned that upcoming election in Hungary next month, where Orbán is facing his most fierce challenge in a decade. How much of this veto do you think is about that internal election campaign for Orbán?
It is also about that, because Orbán wants to be seen, and we know that Orbán is struggling in the election, so it's very close to call, and obviously Orbán wants to be seen by the Hungarians as someone who protects Hungarian national interest in Brussels. In many countries, sometimes in elections, it works to be seen as fighting Europe in the name of the national interest. And that's what Orbán is doing, and especially because he knows that the support to Ukraine is less popular in Hungary than in other European countries for different reasons. So Orbán is trying to explore that in order to benefit in the election next month.
And from the Ukrainian perspective, how urgent is this loan? Zelensky has already expressed concerns that US resources might be tied up in the Middle East. How concerned will Ukraine be about the overspill of those two conflicts?
Ukraine definitely needs this money very soon. I would say latest by May, the Ukrainians should be receiving financial support for a budget, but also military material bought with money from this loan. And I mean, there could be a chance here for the Europeans to link up the war in Ukraine with the war in Iran. And that connection should be made in terms of an alliance between Iran and Russia. We know very well that the Iranians supported the Russian war against Ukraine for the last 4 years by providing especially drones to Russia. But we also know that Russia is probably the closest ally of Iran, and has been giving some support, not a lot, because the Russians have to war in Ukraine, but the Russians have been giving some support to Iran in the war against the United States, especially around intelligence, but also with some military equipment. So this could be an opportunity for the Europeans to negotiate with Trump and to clearly show Trump that Putin is both a threat to Europe and to the United States, and that a cooperation between Europeans and Americans against Russia would be very helpful for both Ukraine and for the American war efforts in Iran.
And another element where these conflicts are overlapping, we could say, is in terms of energy. We're seeing Trump ease sanctions on Russian energy, and how much do you think that looming energy crisis in Europe is going to be on the agenda today?
Oh, that will be the main topic on the agenda with the Ukrainian loan. I mean, the Europeans will definitely are very worried about the energy prices. They want to bring energy prices down. I mean, they will need also to show that the European Union has alternatives to Qatar when it comes to buying gas, especially LNG. At the moment, the European Union imports around 6% of its gas from Qatar. It's not a lot. In fact, the European Union could need to buy more gas from Azerbaijan, from Algeria, because the gas from Qatar is not coming to Europe. So they need to find at least 6% of the gas that the Europeans consume from elsewhere. And obviously, at the moment, the Europeans will not buy that gas from Russia. I mean, as you know, the Europeans are still buying a bit of LNG from Russia, but the idea is to stop buying completely from next year. And it's very difficult to see the Europeans increase the quantity of LNG they buy from Russia. So they need to find gas elsewhere. And it would be good if the European Council also addressed that question.
And obviously there's been a bit of tension between EU countries and Trump, with President Trump urging allies to deploy military assets to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Are we expecting any conversations from a military sense, but also in terms of the relationship with Trump? What are we expecting to hear about that?
I mean, I think the Europeans are very careful to avoid any military involvement in the war in the Gulf. And we can call it now a war in the Gulf rather than just in Iran. The Europeans will be very careful to avoid that. But they also need Trump's support in Ukraine. So by linking the two wars, they could possibly reach a deal with Trump, where the Europeans could help the Americans in the Strait of Hormuz, even if it's at a later stage, to patrol, to guarantee the security of the Strait of Hormuz. And at the same time, Trump and the Americans would be more supportive of Ukraine and would help more Europe to support Ukraine. So I think that there could be an opportunity here to engage in a deal with Trump and to negotiate with Trump. Now, the big question is whether the Europeans will take that opportunity or not.
And what are your expectations in terms of that?
To be very frank with you, not a lot, because I think now the priority for the Europeans is to not get involved in the Gulf, in the war in the Gulf. But these things could change. And for two reasons. I mean, one, the Europeans could see that there is an opportunity to make a deal with Trump. And Trump is still crucial for the war in Ukraine and also for the peace process once it comes back. Now, I mean, it's difficult to see peace process coming back in Ukraine anytime soon, but it will come back. But the second reason is, I mean, the wars are very unpredictable. And even if the Europeans don't want to get involved in the war in the Gulf, the war could still come to Europe. And I'll give you an example. Iran so far attacked 3 times Turkey. So 3 missile attacks on Turkey. Turkey is a NATO member. Turkey, if they wanted to, I don't think they don't at the moment, but if they wanted, they could evoke Article 5 of NATO, of the Atlantic Alliance Treaty. In that case, the Europeans would be involved in the war because they would need to come in support of Turkey, which is a NATO member. So, I mean, I think the Europeans will start looking at this war with time in a different way, rather than just a US intervention as a regional war that could have an impact on Europe. Definitely, it's already having on the energy prices, but could also have a military geopolitical impact on Europe. And so if the Europeans realize that, then they will also try to take that opportunity to get Trump on their side in Ukraine, I think. At least that's what they should do.
It's a balancing act, isn't it, for the Europeans? Thank you very much for joining us on the programme ahead of the summit and for providing your analysis.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back to A News. Pakistan has announced a pause in strikes against Afghanistan at the request of Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey. Islamabad says the decision was made ahead of the Muslim holiday of Eid. The pause in strikes is set to take effect at midnight local time on Wednesday and remain in place until midnight on Monday. The announcement comes 3 days after Afghan officials said a Pakistani airstrike hit a rehabilitation hospital in Kabul, killing hundreds. Pakistan has rejected the claims, insisting its strikes targeted military facilities in and around Kabul. Turkey's foreign minister has continued diplomatic talks in Saudi Arabia. On Wednesday, he held a series of meetings in Riyadh aimed at containing the escalating conflict in the Middle East as regional actors seek a unified response amid the mounting crisis. Adam Morrow has more from Istanbul.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has held a series of high-level meetings in Saudi Arabia as part of ongoing diplomatic efforts to contain the escalating regional conflict. In Riyadh, Fidan met his Azerbaijani counterpart Ceyhun Bayramov, highlighting the close coordination between Ankara and Baku amid growing instability. According to diplomatic sources, Fidan and Bayramov discussed recent regional developments and exchanged views on efforts to prevent further escalation. Fidan also held one-on-one talks with his Saudi, Jordanian and Pakistani counterparts on the sidelines of a high-level summit hosted by Saudi Arabia, which brought together key countries from the Middle East and Asia. Along with Turkey, participants at the emergency summit included Azerbaijan, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Qatar, Kuwait, Pakistan, Syria and Jordan. The talks were held amid steadily mounting tensions following a U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran that began on February 28th, which has since drawn retaliatory strikes by Iran across multiple countries in the region. Details of the closed-door meetings in Riyadh were not immediately made available. But diplomatic sources have said that Fidan was expected to stress the need for an immediate resolution of the conflict, now in its third week, through diplomatic means. Fidan was also expected to warn that continued escalation could cause long-term and potentially irreversible damage to regional relations. He was also expected to emphasize that attacks targeting Gulf countries were unacceptable and to call on regional actors to exercise restraint and avoid being drawn into a wider war. Speaking Thursday, Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan announced that Riyadh had not ruled out military action in response to repeated missile and drone attacks by Iran. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Iran has dismissed reports of cross-border incidents against Azerbaijan and warned against external attempts to undermine relations between the two neighbours. In an exclusive interview with A News, our correspondent Taraj Shiralilu spoke with Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson and Minister of Cultural Heritage. Let's see more from that interview.
Iran and the Republic of Azerbaijan have many things in common. We have historical, religious, civilizational, cultural ties. And it is only natural for both of us to care for the continuation and strengthening of our bilateral relations based on mutual respects and mutual interest. That's the principal policy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Both countries at the same time have to be very careful because there are certain adversaries who do not want to see these friendly relations to be further strengthened and developed. In recent days, for instance, you have heard the rumors or news that there was one drone or missile launched from Iran to a part of territory of the Republic of Azerbaijan. But since we attach high importance to the mutual trust between the two countries, our officials at the highest level intervened. There were very constructive talks between the two presidents with a view to removing any sort of misunderstanding between the two states.
Iran and Azerbaijan share cultural and civilizational heritage, including Nowruz. We were going to celebrate Nowruz festivities in Tehran in coming days, but the imposed US-Israel war prevented us from hosting the countries which commemorate this occasion. Devastation of Iran's civilizational works and monuments equals destruction of such historical and cultural works in the neighboring countries which share them with Iran. I would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to the people and statesmen of the Republic of Azerbaijan, notably President Ilham Aliyev, for expressing their condolences over the martyrdom of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, as well as for sending message of congratulations on the election of the new leader. In addition to our nations, our leaders President Masoud Pezeshkian and President Ilham Aliyev have established our bilateral ties at regional level. Enemies have been trying to drive a wedge in the friendship of our peoples and governments. However, the sincere and close relations of our presidents foiled their plots.
Kazakhstan is facing growing electricity demand and is looking to expand its renewable energy capacity. A major wind power project is now being developed in the south of the country as authorities try to address regional power shortages. Our correspondent reports from Almaty.
In the Jambul region in southern Kazakhstan, preparations are underway for the construction of a major wind power plant, one of the largest energy projects in Central Asia. The project is being developed by Kazakhstan's national energy company Samruk Energo together with France Total Energies. Total investment is expected to exceed $1.2 billion. Construction will take place in the Moinkom district, an area known for some of the most favorable wind conditions in the country, making it well suited for large-scale renewable energy projects. The wind farm will include 150 turbines, each with a capacity of around 7 megawatts, spread across roughly 20,000 hectares. Annual electricity generation is expected to reach about 4 billion kilowatt hours. Electricity demand in Kazakhstan is rising and shortages are already being felt, especially in the south. This project is expected to help ease the pressure and bring more renewable energy into the system. The wind farm is due to be completed by the end of 2028. At the same time, the Ministry of Energy says a broader plan is underway, with 68 projects expected to deliver a combined capacity of 6.6 gigawatts by 2029. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Now, Nowruz celebrations are underway across Azerbaijan. At the Gala State Historical and Ethnographic Reserve, visitors are experiencing traditional culture and performances in a unique medieval setting.
With Nowruz just around the corner, festive events are taking place across Azerbaijan. Their festive atmosphere is now being felt at the Gala State Historical Ethnographic Reserve, where visitors are immersed in the spring fortress celebration set in a historical environment.
A festive program kicked off with the lighting of a bonfire, bringing the spirit of Novruz to life. Visitors of all ages are gathering to celebrate the holiday in a traditional setting, surrounded by colourful decorations and live performances.
As a young Azerbaijani, I am very happy that this tradition is still continuing in a solemn manner. For me, it is both pleasant and proud that for several years now, both in Shusha and Kankendi, we have been celebrating this holiday with a joyful solemnity.
All the elements of Novruz are on display for visitors. Traditional crafts like carpet weaving and pottery are showcased alongside music performances, theatre acts and art exhibitions. Dances take centre stage in the celebrations.
We have gathered here for the Novruz holiday. The atmosphere is great. The dance we perform is a national dance. We use fire, swords and fireworks during the dance.
Visitors also get a chance to see the creativity of students and staff.
Today we present a collection of handiwork of students and teaching staff. The works are eye-catching and also demonstrate the activities of our educational institution.
Organisers say such events help preserve cultural heritage while bringing people closer to their traditions.
Currently, residents of Kala village and the surrounding villages have gathered here. Our guests and the residents are actively participating in the revival of our traditions.
Novruz is not only celebrated in Azerbaijan, but also across many countries in the region. It marks the arrival of spring and the beginning of a new year. The holiday is a time of renewal, family gatherings, and vibrant cultural traditions.
That baklava looks very tempting. After the break, we'll take a look at the meeting which took place in Paris between Azerbaijani and French government officials. Don't go anywhere.
One-on-one with Mars, the global AI and sensor technology starts now.
We need to adapt much quicker and much faster to allow us to detect, to classify and to ultimately defeat these new asymmetric threats. We can use NIDAR to autonomously instruct and guide that asset, whether it be a tracked UGV or a surveillance drone.
Welcome back to A News. A meeting took place in Paris between Azerbaijani and French government officials yesterday, where the two sides discussed their relations as well as the broader situation in the region. Joining us now to unpack this is Maxime Gouan, Associate Professor at Nishantashi University. Thank you for being with us. Now, what do we know about this meeting? Can we make any guesses in terms of what was on the agenda?
So far, a few things have been published about the content of the discussions, but what can be said for sure is this meeting in Paris took place about 10 days after Mr. Aliyev and Mr. Macron discussed on the telephone. As far as we can see, it was a positive, the outcome was positive. And more generally about the context, France was among the first countries who condemned the bombing of Nakhchivan by Iran. And both France and Azerbaijan have a similar position concerning the war in Iran, not taking part to the Israeli and American actions, but sticking on a defensive attitude against the illegal aggressions of Iran against neighboring countries, including Azerbaijan, but also United Arab Emirates and so on.
And what do you think that tells us about the relations between the two countries, that they do seem to be aligned on these issues?
Can you repeat, please?
What does that tell us about the relations between France and Azerbaijan at the moment?
So for the moment, we are gradually returning to the normal, gradually improving the bilateral relations. Of course, a turning point was the signing in Washington of agreements concerning the road across Zangezur, because as I told some of your colleagues, the fear in Paris was that this issue could be used by the pro-Russian, pro-Iranian opposition in Armenia against Nikol Pashinyan. Now a compromise has been reached, which is the most important both for Baku and for Paris. So the fear does not exist, the Minsk group does not exist, and it was a boost for the bilateral relation, definitely. And the similar attitude concerning the war in Iran, of course, can only accelerate this change.
And what about the energy crisis that may potentially face Europe as a result of this war? Do you think that could have been discussed, or whether Azerbaijan has a role to play there in that Europe will potentially have that energy crisis?
Definitely. First, the role of Azerbaijan increased as early as 2022 as a result of the illegal aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And then it is increasing again because the Hormuz road is endangered. Even if the war terminates after 1 or 2 weeks, there will be the risk that the Iranian regime will want to take revenge in a way or in another. So the Hormuz road will remain relevant, but not as secure as it used to be for decades. So what Azerbaijan calls the middle corridor is even more relevant, both for the production of Azerbaijan and for the production of Central Asia, transiting by Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, etc.
So do you view these...
And of course everyone understands that in Paris.
And do you view these conversations as a result simply of this conflict in the Middle East, or could it be the start of a broader long-term diplomatic relation between Azerbaijan and France?
Yes, it could be, because the interests are convergent and more convergent. It is, as you know, probably there are a lot of French investment in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. You mentioned that actually, TotalEnergies in Kazakhstan, but it's just one example among others. There is an increase of investment and partnership with Turkey. Azerbaijan is in the middle of all that. There was also a big investment of TotalEnergies in the hydrocarbons of Azerbaijan, and there are many other possibilities. So yes, I wish, and it's quite possible, quite likely, that it will be just a step toward something more intense in the near future.
Interesting, isn't it? And what about this phone call that took place? Do you view that as one of the many stepping stones, or do you think there's a significance in this conversation happening?
It's always significant when two chiefs of state discuss on the telephone, but it's even more significant when their two main advisors for foreign affairs meet only 10 days later and seem quite happy of the meeting.
And taking place
even more, given the context we have already discussed.
Interesting, isn't it? And today as well, we'll be looking at the EU summit. I'm sure you'll be following that as well. So what should we be looking out for here in the South Caucasus?
Concerning the EU, the position of the EU?
In the EU summit today.
Okay, in the EU summit today. So for the moment, the EU position is similar to the one of France. Sticking on a defensive position, condemning the aggression of Iran, and as far as possible, trying to avoid escalation of this war and to avoid especially the illegal strikes against neighbors. So the EU summit will surely confirm that. Maybe we will have more tangible announcements, but it's a bit early to guess.
Certainly one to watch, isn't it? We'll be keeping an eye on it. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme and for providing your analysis.
My pleasure. Happy Nowruz.
That's your news for this hour. We'll bring you all of the latest developments. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.